my street, my boulevard. It's right up my Straza. Oh my God, it's garden right up there. Ah, it's right up my podcast.
Oh. Welcome to Right Up My Podcast. My name's Kate White.
And my name's Gwen Watson. And this is the podcast in which we talk to absolutely awesome people about the really great ideas that they have to make us feel good.
And this episode, we are talking to Verity Glasgow all about how to argue better. Verity is the CEO of a charity called OnePlusOne that specialises in helping people to have healthier relationships and to learn to argue better.
Oh, no, she isn't.
Oh, yes, she is.
I think this is something that we could all be better at.
Definitely. It's such a sort of core of any relationship with anybody, whether they're a family member or you're in a romantic relationship with them or it's someone you work with. You can't avoid it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to have an argument at some point.
Yeah. You're going to have conflict. You're going to disagree.
Yeah.
And that's not the problem. It's the way you do it that counts.
Exactly.
And this actually ties in really nicely with episode 18, all about listening, if you can remember back that far, because a lot of what we learned today is about actually bloody well listening to each other.
Yes,
for a start.
Actually listen.
Yeah. Rather than just thinking, what shall I say? How can I butt in and say my version of the story?
Which we all know a lot of people who do that, who are just waiting for a pause in the conversation to be able to tell their story. So it's not a conversation, it's just an exchanging of stories with a similar theme.
Which is one of my biggest bugbears, but I'm not saying that I don't do it because I absolutely probably do it as well. I mean, maybe.
I mean, unlikely.
But also I think people get very nervous in groups and stuff, and they think, oh, I've got to tell stories, or I've got to, etc. And I think the best way, if you're nervous about being in a group, the best way to make it easier for yourself is to just ask questions and listen to people.
100%. To the point where sometimes if I'm going to meet up with some people that I don't know really, really well, I'll often think in my mind before I meet up with them, okay, just going through what I know about them and thinking about topics that I can ask them about. So I've got those ready in my back pocket.
Do you?
Yeah.
Hey,
is that weird?
That's good.
Is that
good?
No,
nothing's weird, Kate. Everything's all right.
There is no weird.
Except for... There's a moment where I thought you were going to say you did research on them, and wrote some notes.
Now that's weird. I'll go through all of
their... Whatever works.
I'll go through all their social media accounts, make a list of points that I know they're interested in, reference that holiday they made with their cousin's child 5 years ago. Damn it, I'm a good conversationalist.
I saw in 2017 that you went to Sicily. I particularly liked the swimsuit you were wearing, and it appears that you really like pasta. Would you like to tell me more about that trip?
Can we discuss your choice of beverage on Thursday, the 28th of March? I am a natural. My conversation sizzles.
Do you know, I've thought it before, I'll say it again, Kate, we don't need guests on this podcast. We've got all the answers.
Exactly, we've got it nailed. I mean, I've never seen such a vision of a perfect human as I'm looking at right now. Oh, God. So come on then, perfect human. What have you been up to? What have you been watching? What have you been devouring and plugging into your brain where other more useful things could probably exist?
Okay, what exciting things? Headlines, exciting things from my life. I went to a hen do and I'm not hungover.
Now that is a big thing.
I mean, I don't know if this has ever happened before in my life. It was a whole weekend, and both nights I went to bed around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and with a cup of tea and a book.
Oh,
and
nice.
I've come out of it because I was thinking I've got to record on Monday, so that was in my head as I turned down various beverages. But I just thought, and it was okay. It's okay to do that and to not actually have a complete raging hangover and write a whole day off or two.
And you didn't feel like you missed out on any of the fun?
I mean, I missed out on some of the fun.
There was some fun missed out on.
But also, and previously I would have been up with those girls till 5 in the morning, whatever. But, does anything good happen after 2? I don't know.
That's so funny you say that. I was just about to say that. There's that whole adage that nothing fun happens after 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I think we can probably all say that is a big fat lie. But
we don't remember what happens. Like, if you don't remember what happens, was it fun? Was it worth it?
Yeah. What was the point in it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've had a few of those, and you're just, the next day you can barely be upright and you can't actually really remember what went on after a certain time. Was it worth it?
And you wonder why. It's funny, when you said you were on a hen do, actually when you explain what you're doing, it sounded like a lot of fun. But there's something about, and it doesn't tend to happen so much anymore, but hen do's you go on in your younger, and it's a big gaggle of 15 girls wearing matching T-shirts and you're out at a bar in town. Oh my God, that just makes my skin crawl. I just find that such an awkward scenario. I do as well.
And and going to clubs, like those really shitty clubs.
Yeah.
Like, I was brought up going to, like house clubs in the 90s.
Yeah.
Really good DJs. It was all about the dancing.
Yeah.
And, there's other stuff. But,
nothing but the dancing.
And then, a lot of my adult life has been going to gay clubs.
Yeah, fun.
And waving the P flag.
Yeah.
But when you go to those straight clubs, like in Reading,
or
something.
God.
Oh, they're fucking awful, man.
They're awful. And you're like having a dance, and before you know it, you're like, oh my God, we're all stood in a circle dancing. I can't cope with this. This is too painful. It's too much.
Batting off men.
Yeah, who come grinding up behind you.
Or worse, not having any men to bat off.
Listen, you can't see this, but both Gwen and I just broke into some sexy dancing there.
Some sexy, shitty club dancing. And and then the bride's got to go and get a guy to give her a pair of underpants. And
oh God!
There's a race with the maid of honour to come back with underpants on their heads.
This is I'm having some sort of PTSD reaction to this. This is bringing back memories. Bringing back memories from the good old days.
The good old days. No thanks. They're done for me.
Can I bring something up? There's a total change of subject. There's no slick segue here.
You are allowed to talk as well in this, Kate. I know I don't always give you that impression.
I'm very excited because you've brought a van. Tell me all about the van.
Oh my God. I've been talking about this for a very long time, that I want a van, because I've got van envy, because a lot of my mates, including you,
hell to the yeah, one of my
favourite
things,
and can go camping.
Yep.
And I've had a little Toyota Yaris, which I cannot camp in.
It's not a van.
It's not.
It's not a van.
And it got written off, as we all know.
Yeah.
Smashed into by a drunken youth while I was in my bed. Let's not go back there. But anyway, now I am the proud owner of a very Westphalian car. A lot of people drive them around here. A Citroen Berlingo.
Oh, I love it. Now, this isn't like, for someone who doesn't live in West Wales and doesn't see a lot of Citroen Berlingos driving around, this isn't a kind of your big VW camper type size, is it? This is a slightly smaller.
Yes.
Is this boring, listeners? Sorry.
I think listeners are going to be thrilled by this. It's like halfway between a car and a van. It's called an MPV, a multi-purpose vehicle.
Oh, excellent.
I can take out the back seats and it's then like a van.
Brilliant.
You can also get like a platform thing that goes over the back seats when they're down, and then you sleep on it.
So exciting.
Oh my God.
Okay, so we need to get...
We're going.
We need to get a camping trip in the diary. Definitely. That's exciting.
It's so exciting. I could not be happier.
Oh,
and the funny thing is, I don't know, that I'm really into my gratitudes.
Yes.
And that I'm always trying to find reasons for things.
Yeah.
And when I was so gutted when my car was written off, as you know, because I really loved it. And because I just said 5 minutes ago. But I said to myself, this has happened. I will be grateful for this one day. I can't see it yet, but I will be grateful for this one day.
Okay, yeah.
That's how I always get myself through stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I went and picked up this car, I was like, okay, here I am. I'm really grateful that happened, because now I've got my dream car.
Because you would never have had that impetus to go and get a van, would you? Because you didn't need it. Yeah, that's true. One door closes and another door opens.
I wouldn't have sorted my shit out to go and get
Yes.
but it's done and I've got it. And you and I are going to go camping, girl.
I'm very excited about that.
Hashtag van life.
Hashtag van life, baby. Bring it on. Once you go van, you'll never go back, I promise you.
As the famous phrase goes.
Yeah. Anyway, what have you been watching?
Well, why don't
Any
you
top
go?
tips?
I've been talking for ages. What have you been watching?
Okay, so I have been watching a documentary called MH370, the plane that disappeared.
Oh, my God.
On Netflix. It's all about the Malaysian Airlines plane that, disappeared. And it's interesting. So I've got mixed feelings about it.
Can I just quickly say, just very, very quick interruption. All of our rump clubbers will know that we were talking about this just very recently. You were saying,
yes,
why isn't there a documentary about this? And then I switched on like a week later and there is. Anyway, just wanted to say that. That's uncanny. I couldn't believe it.
Uncanny.
Yes.
Exactly. Tapped into something.
Yeah.
But anyway, I found it... So my initial reaction for the first episode was a little bit ick, just because I don't like watching other people's pain and trauma for my own entertainment.
Yeah.
There's a line, isn't there, with these documentaries. So it is good, like the educational value, the fact that there is this big question mark and there's been some very suspect things going on is, from a journalistic point of view, that should be spoken about and that should be out there. But I do find... the kind of that line of, oh my goodness, I'm watching these people's trauma as something to do on a Sunday night. You know, that leaves me feeling quite uncomfortable.
I had the exact same feeling and had a feeling of guilt, because I think a lot of us, and the same recently, it's an awful thing to say, but when Nicole Bully went missing, you know, we're all like checking the news every day. It becomes, in a way, a form of entertainment.
Exactly.
We're all like,
yeah,
ooh, it's a mystery. Ooh, what's happened? And when that I remember when that Malaysian Airlines went missing. Was it 2014? I think it was. And there were we were all. Well, I was stuck to the news, and it was huge. And then watching it, when I saw that they'd done a documentary, I was like, oh, get the popcorn ready! Like, I was just so excited. And then you're watching it, and there are 239 people who have gone missing and it's never been explained, and it's all their families, and you're seeing their families' pain. And I was like, oh, fucking hell, this is awful, actually.
It's awful. And the pain of those people, the sort of hell they must be living in, just not knowing. I can't even imagine that kind of, how awful that must be. And all the dead ends that they keep coming at, and all of the no's and the closed doors.
And the conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Also, I now know more about it and understand more about it than I did before. So for that extent, I am glad I watched it, because it is this insane question mark.
Well, it is, because it is a major airline, one of the major airlines in the world, on a major route. It was Kuala Lumpur to Bangkok. And it's like, how can this happen in this modern day with how can there not be a record of where this plane went?
No.
So I think it is good viewing, but I think in the end you come out not really, I don't know, you come out thinking, well, we're kind of still, it's unexplained.
It's unexplained, exactly. Another show that I just started watching last night, actually, which is also on Netflix, it's called Lockwood & Co. It's kind of... Oh, have you heard of it?
No, but we were going to watch it last night when we were looking for things to watch.
So what brought it to my attention was it's produced by Joe Cornish.
Yes, that's why we thought maybe we'd watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is
it
anyone
good? Who doesn't know who Joe Cornish is, he's Joe from the Adam and Joe Show. He's part of the kind of the collaborative crew of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. He did Attack the Block, so he's got really great credentials. Only watched the first episode, but I really enjoyed it. It's basically about... it's in a world where something has happened that's unlocked the paranormal world. And so there's a lot of paranormal activity going on. And humans are too buttoned up. Teenagers are a lot more sensitive to it. So you get all these agencies that fight the paranormal who are crewed by teenagers. And that's the premise of it. I really enjoyed it.
It looks a bit young adult. Is it?
It is.
But can we still enjoy it as grown-up adults?
Yeah. So I think it is aimed at like young adults. But I did really enjoy it. As someone who doesn't always require things to be highbrow, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
That's good. Well, last night we were sat there because we were very, very excited that the new series of Ted Lasso dropped last week.
So exciting.
Oh, my God. So we were like, great. We had dinner, we had wine, we were sat there, we hit play. I've just rewatched the first 2 series. This is on Apple TV, by the way.
Yeah.
I've just rewatched the first 2 series, which was just joy.
It's just brilliant.
Oh my God, I love it so much. And we were so excited. And then after one episode, it started showing us trailers for other shows. We were like, what's it doing? Come on, just go straight to went back to the menu. Next episode's coming out next Wednesday.
We're so out of the habit of having to wait for things, aren't we?
Know.
The way that we watch TV, we just want it now.
Exactly. And I think maybe Disney does that with stuff as well, releases it once a week.
Yes.
So, but because they obviously want you to have a subscription for longer, whereas we're like, right, cancel the subscription. We'll wait for it all to run out and then, then we'll pay for it again and watch the whole thing.
This is totally what we're going to do. We're going to wait for it to be out there, get a month's subscription, binge it, cancel the subscription.
Exactly.
This is the plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I'm very excited, though.
Oh, my God. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, bloody do yourself a favour. I think everybody should watch it. It's just
pure joy.
Joy in a moustache.
And I want to be more Ted Lasso. I want to be like, he just sees the good in everyone and the positive in every scenario. And we do, as we get to know him through the second series in particular, you do realise that there are dark areas. He is an actual real human being.
He's had his own struggles.
Yeah,
and it's a lot about mental health and a lot about men's mental health.
Yeah, it's true.
It's which is relevant to this series, and it is football related. You don't have to like football to enjoy it.
No.
I'm quite indifferent to football, but still loved it.
But Ted Lasso isn't new news, so I'm hoping that people are aware of it, aware of what's going on. So good. So
because we couldn't watch the second episode of Ted Lasso, we started looking at what's on Netflix and ended up, turns out my friend Matt hadn't seen Feel Good. Now, we've spoken about this before because we watched it probably about a year or so ago.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'll rewatch that. And it is just as good. And I bloody love it.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's one of the best things that I've seen on telly.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant. And I watched, after you said that to me the other day, I kind of watched a sort of highlights reel of it, and it just reminded me of how incredible it is. And I'm very excited because Mae Martin is going to be on the next series of Taskmaster, which starts at the end of March. So it'd be interesting to see what she's like out of that, because I think a lot of the character is based on her real life experience.
Yes, so Mae Martin is a Canadian comedian, and she has struggled with addiction in her life, and this is a lot of that is autobiographical about her own experience with addiction, and how we have an addiction, and then we've working on that one addiction, but it transfers into other areas of our lives, and so you learn a lot through it. She's non-binary, and it's about her relationship with this woman played by, is her name Charlotte Ritchie? If I made that up? Yeah. From Ghosts fame. Yeah, and she was in series 4 of You, which I don't watch, but I love her. And it's their relationship. Lisa Kudrow's there playing Mae Martin's mum. There's just such a great cast. It's really brilliant. Funny, really well written.
Yeah, check it. If you haven't watched it, obviously we've spoken about it before, but if you haven't watched it, it's well worth going to watch. It's one of the best things I've seen. Yeah. It's amazing.
Listen to this podcast and you will hear about all TV that was released at least a couple of years ago.
I know, we are so of the moment. I discovered this amazing new film series called Indiana Jones. Guess what, people? We are so cutting edge.
It's right up my podcast.
Now, before we get started, we'd just like to remind you about our Patreon.
This is where we put all our episode extras for free, and for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can join the very exclusive Rump Club.
Yes, as a member, you will get access to extra Wiffle Waffle from Kate and I, behind-the-scenes content, music and lyrics from our incredible jingles, and we're even going to put some bonus episodes up there too.
The funds from Patreon go towards covering our running costs, as well as earning our unending love and gratitude.
So if you'd like to become one of our supporters and join the Rump Club, head on over to patreon.com/rightupmypodcast. Thank you. This This is episode 40, all about how to argue better.
And we are talking to Verity Glasgow, who is the CEO of a charity called OnePlusOne. So this charity specialises in helping people to have healthy relationships and learn to argue better. And they also provide training for people who work with families and young people. Now, I feel like I want to say at this point that in this episode, we're talking about healthy conflict within mutually respectful relationships. And I think it is important to state that, because if you are in a relationship that feels abusive, then Verity has sent us some links for where you can find specialist help and support. And we're going to put these links in the show notes. So please do look them up.
Yes, because I think the crux of it is the power balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Verity was specifically talking about healthy relationships where the power balance is equal. And if you feel that you're in a relationship where that isn't equal, check the links out, because there are people who can offer you support.
Yeah. And we started our conversation with Verity by asking her, how can we argue better?
We all argue, don't we? I mean, we all argue with, our loved ones, sometimes more so with people we love more, with friends, with work colleagues. Sometimes, conflict exists in our lives, and arguments happen. They have to happen. And what we do in terms of the relationship work that we do is we help people to argue better. And it's how you argue. So it's the difference between how you're arguing. You can have helpful arguments, but you can also have harmful arguments. And
so the first thing you said there, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, was that you said arguments have to happen. So I guess, first of all, tick. Do argue. Arguing is okay.
Yeah, it's a form of communication, isn't it? And also it's a way of coming to a point of view. There's a bit of considering someone else's feelings, seeing it from someone else's point of view, negotiation. There's lots of skills, actually, in kind of having a good argument. We're probably all quite familiar with, I think, harmful arguments, I would say. Things like name-calling, blaming, being harsh, negative, saying mean things, jumping in with bad stuff. We've all done that. I've done it. I still, people say to me, in terms of your job, does that mean that you just have helpful arguments the whole time? No, it's not. It's not, because it's not human. It's really hard to always be in the space of stopping and listening. And then in terms of the helpful arguments, like I was saying, it's using skills like problem solving. Seeing something from somebody else's point of view is really, really powerful. And I think a lot of what we talk about in the kind of stop, just take a breath, just take a moment, it feels a bit, it's not rocket science, isn't it? It feels quite simple. But actually, when you're in the heat of the moment and when someone's really pushed your buttons, and maybe when you're stressed and tired, and there's all the other factors that have come into it, it is actually really hard to stop and just listen, take a moment, and not try to win an argument and jump into the harmful ways of arguing.
And people learn habits, don't they? And presumably we learn how to argue from our childhood or something, or we witness it from our parents. And I really find we get stuck into ways of arguing. With my ex-boyfriend, who has been mentioned many times on this, even we'd split up and then years later ended up living with each other for lockdown. And then we're straight back to the petty arguing that we always used to do. And I was like, why am I being like this? Like, this isn't who I am anymore. But it's really hard to break those habits, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, the background to the charity that I run, OnePlusOne, is that we take the kind of relationship science and the understanding of relationships, and we learn our kind of styles for communicating and arguing through what we see as children. And often I think even I'm thinking about sibling arguments now. Often when I go back, I've got 4 siblings and I'm like quite low down in the pecking order. And when we get back together, you kind of almost are back in your place, like you were saying about where you were with your ex.
Yes.
You find yourself back in that place, sort of fighting for your life, and those behaviours that you kind of display, and you're not yourself, or you're not yourself that you are now. And so much of kind of how we communicate and how we relate, to a romantic partner or friend or whatever is completely and utterly down to kind of our past. We refer to them as maybe past vulnerabilities or past experiences that we then bring into our lives at times of stress. So at times when we're feeling a bit vulnerable now, and a bit overwhelmed and unable to cope, those behaviours can kind of come back in. And one of the basic things that I find really helpful is understanding, for example, what stress looks like on me.
Okay.
So what am I like when I'm stressed? Like really thinking about my behaviours when I'm stressed. How do I act? Because a lot of the time we talk about what's our conflict style, don't we? You know,
Yeah.
are you someone who goes into like the silent mode? Do you leave? Do you slam the door? Do you bring the kitchen sink? You know, what's your conflict style? But another really important one is like, what's your stress style? So how do you behave when you're stressed? Do you withdraw? Do you need to kind of take it out on somebody else? You know, what does it look like? And I think if you can understand what stress looks like on somebody else in your life, so maybe that's your partner, maybe that's a work colleague, maybe it's your sister, a friend, you can see that where their behaviours are coming from. So how they're responding to you isn't a response to your question, which is, you know, can you take the bins out, or can you let the dog out, or, you know, or can you send me that presentation because I can't find it in the folder? You know, those sorts of basic questions that sometimes elicit a really quite harsh response. And that's often because that person is stressed and they're not coping with that stress. And so they're kind of responding in that way.
That's really interesting. So you see what's happening and modify your response as a result of that, because and I guess you need to practice doing that as well, so because sometimes you'll have a real knee-jerk reaction to that person's knee-jerk reaction, so it's kind of slowing that down. And
that's so true. It's kind of like a game of tennis, and conversations aren't they, and arguments are, it's like a sort of serve and return. But understanding who we are in relation to another person is so key, and the practice, like you say, is really, really important. I mean, relationships are literally fundamental to being human, aren't they? We relate to others, no matter where that is and no matter what kind of day we're having. And so understanding more about yourself and how you relate to others is and practicing that and being reflective, etc., that's just really, really key.
So actually arguing better is going to be different with all the different people in your life, depending on what their stress responses are. I mean, we know, like I know if I get stressed, I get snappy with the people around me. But if my husband or if my best mate gets stressed, they respond in different ways. So I guess I've got to, it's different with all those different relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't be, you know, again, we're only human, so we kind of can't be perfect. And sometimes our return is going to be harsh, and sometimes we are going to try and win the argument. But yes, it is. And I think when we talk about the practice as well, we try to kind of help people to visualise things. So talk about the kind of logs and fire, and what's the match, what's the fuel, what makes the argument worse, what could the water be. So just trying to think about ways that you know that you can kind of bring something down, or bring the kind of argument down to a point where it's not actually harmful but it becomes helpful. So how can you turn it around? And we talk about things like using the basic things, you know, using an I statement and that kind of thing, just starting up with that rather than starting up with a harsh kind of startup, which is what we call it.
So that means, just to clarify, because we hear this a lot, don't we? And I don't know if I always get this right. So it's instead of like, you made me feel, is it kind of saying, so when you did this, you made me feel shit. But it's like, in this situation, I felt shit.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And it's so simple, and it almost seems really basic. You know, I felt really hurt when you snapped back at me when I was just trying to talk to you about the washing up. And I know that it's not about me, but it felt like it was about me. You know, that kind of thing.
And so that's not pushing the other person into a defensive position then, in theory.
That makes them stop. Oh, hang on, she's not doing the usual thing, which is, you know. And then it just makes someone stop for a moment and see it from the other person's point of view, and then see their own behaviour. So, not only does it sort of diffuse, but it also impacts the other person and their response.
It's interesting because a friend of mine said something that really triggers her when having an argument with someone is when they say, well, I'm sorry you feel like that, as opposed to, well, I'm sorry I made you feel like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that's such a subtle difference in the words that are being used, but such a massive, the connotations of what they're saying are so different.
It's so true. It's so true. The first one is an easy kind of throwaway line, isn't it? Because it's not really sorry at all.
Yes.
I've got a feeling like I might want to make myself a grilled cheese sandwich. Kinda hungry and I can't see nothing else that's gonna do. I love a little bit of mustard. I love a tasty pickle. Oh my gosh, I can't believe these flavours. It's amazing what a crunchy, melty texture gives my soul. Everything I ever needed in a lunchy snack. Can't quite tell you how it feels. Here's a thought, would you like a grilled sandwich? I could easily make another if you'd like that. Don't give instructions though, that would be daft. I know more about this stuff than you do. It's a feeling like I might wanna make myself a grilled cheese sandwich. I'm kinda hungry and I can't see nothing else I was gonna do.
So you were saying, so one of the ways to turn your argument from being harmful to helpful is to use I statements. What were you going to go on to say?
Oh, thanks for that, because I was going to go on to say something. It was brilliant.
I'm always aware when I've interrupted somebody and they've not got to finish their point.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, because I would have forgotten. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I thought might be helpful to mention. We kind of review all the evidence and look at kind of what works in relationships. And there's one famous researcher you probably have heard of called John Gottman. And he talks about this kind of magic ratio. So for every one negative moment in a relationship, 5 positive ones are needed to balance it out. Oh. So imagine you say, one negative thing. Imagine what you would then need to do to kind of rebalance that and kind of repair that communication.
So that's the comparable kind of impact.
That feels exhausting.
Yeah. It's actually really funny because the other day my kids, I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, they were really arguing and being mean to each other, like mean. And I said, do you know, in my work, and I was trying to explain this concept to them. And then they had to practice saying 5 nice things, to each other. And by the end of it, you're right, Kate, they were just exhausted, bored, didn't want to be mean to each other anymore.
It's not worth it. Don't say the one mean thing.
But also, it was a good example of feeling what it feels like for someone to say something nice to you, just to... it's there's also a lot of research out there about the little things that are really, really important, like the tiny things, like the small gestures, someone kind of making you a cup of tea or knowing how you take your tea, or just those small things of kindness and someone being nice to you and how that feels, and then how you would like to then respond to that and be nice to someone else.
Yes, because that's the thing, isn't it? You get into a bit of a standoff. You respond to kind with kind, don't you? And vice versa. If somebody's being an asshat, then you have no feeling of compassion or generosity towards them.
Yeah. And then it can spiral, can't it? Because it just goes back and forth and begins to expand.
Yeah, and definitely, I think in relationships, and I'm talking from a point of view of friendships as well as couple relationships. It can be polarizing. It can just push you so far apart that you kind of can't really remember why you were friends in the first place, or what was so good about this friendship that that I spent so long with this person. And it's the same in couple relationships. We talk about trying to remember the good times, so can you remember something that really connected the two of you, and what were those? And if you can kind of bring yourself back to those moments and actually, what was great about them and connect, because the more of that kind of harmful arguing that goes on that pushes people further and further and further and further away, coming back together can be very, very challenging. There's so much repair that needs to be done. And one of my colleagues specialises, she's a psychologist who specialises in forgiveness. But, in terms of really forgiving someone, like applied forgiveness in your everyday life, and then how you can actually move on from that. So I think coming back together is really, really important when there's been any amount of kind of harmful exchange.
I remember one of this gratitude exercise that I learnt is when you've got a real problem with somebody, and that you then sit down and write out like 10 or 20 things that you're grateful for them for. And it really, really works in shifting how you currently feel about that person and coming out at the end with compassion.
Oh, yeah, I can really imagine that. That's, I think, gratitude, that it's all so linked. It really is. Because when you're in that state of stress, cortisol, arguing, you know, all those feelings, you can't be rational. You can't remember what it is that's good about that person. But bringing yourself back to that, I think, is, that sounds really good.
That can be a tricky one, actually. Sometimes, although we were saying it's not good to sort of walk away and avoid a confrontation, sometimes you do need to go and have some space to do what you were saying there, to kind of just calm down that fight response, and so that you can think rationally. How do you do that without looking like you're just walking away?
Yeah, because we were talking before about how it's really natural to feel immediately defensive and to immediately going in to defend or attack back. And yeah, we were saying oftentimes when you've gone away from the situation and come back, or gone away from the situation, you kind of go, oh, okay, maybe I can see what they were talking. Yeah, maybe I can see what they mean. Yeah. How do we get there quicker?
Yeah. Practice. I mean, it sounds so simple, but what Kate was saying earlier about the importance of practice. But I think also, you know, being able to talk about your conflict styles is really important, and kind of saying, I can't cope. I cannot cope with it. I need to walk away. I need some time. It's not because I don't respect you or appreciate that, you know, you need to have this discussion. But when you're constantly shouting at me, it makes me think about when I was a child and I was always shouted at, or, you know, but being able to kind of just be honest about your conflict style, I think, is really, really important. And then learning. So another thing that we have around how a sort of like 5 rules around talking about stress or in a difficult conversation. Again, I think just kind of being really clear in your mind. So we talk about sticking to the facts. So not bringing in all of the other stuff, or also not bringing in old arguments. You know, don't dredge stuff up.
That's a biggie, isn't it?
It's really tempting. You know, it's so tempting, isn't it? Or then it just drags all that back up. So just try and stick to the facts. And then the other thing is the I statements, so say how you feel. I feel like this. And then the other one is really listening. And that sounds, again, like, what do you mean really listening? But we actually do have this listening exercise that we often get people to try out. And it is actually quite hard to really listen, you know, to just not interrupt, literally let the person talk. And then once they've finished, reflect what you've heard back. So to demonstrate that you've really listened.
Oh, so verbally repeat it.
Yeah.
To show that you've understood and listened. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the 4th one, which is reflecting back. So it's like you've really listened, and reflect back what you've heard from that. And it can't be about you, you know, bringing it back to you. It has to be about what you've heard that person say. Okay. And then the 5th one is actually asking for support, which we know can often be really, really hard for people, especially when you're having a difficult conversation, or if you're having an argument, you're kind of like on your own and you don't want to be in this team. You don't want to kind of have that, do you? You want to be sort of like fighting your corner. But actually, maybe the reason you got into the argument in the first place is because you need some support, and you need to ask for a bit of help.
Do you mean like help from the person you're speaking to, or just generally help outside of yourself?
I think it could be either, actually. When I was giving that example, I was thinking, could be quite a few ways of addressing that. Because if you're in a situation, you know, domestic situation, which is often the kind of like, we call it the hidden issues argument. So it's not about the washing up or taking out the bins. It's about, you know, so much more. And actually, if you manage to kind of diffuse that argument and get through your stages and think, actually, what I really need is one night a week for you to do this for me. You know, that's your support. That might be your support. But also, you know, in a work situation, you might be at the point where you can't take anything else on, you know, and it's really, I don't know about you, but I feel like it can be often, well, I'm definitely a yes person. I know that. So I'll say, yes, no, I can do that. I can do that. And actually at one point it's like, actually, I can't do that. And the reason that I'm getting so stressed and the reason that I can't actually have a proper conversation with you is because I need some help. I need somebody else to do this bit of work. And then also it could be completely external. It could be that you actually need some time to talk to somebody to work through something that you're finding difficult, or you need to really try and address the fact that you don't use self-care in any way, you know, so it might be those sorts of things.
This is just a little song, nothing much, it isn't very long. I just thought it would be good to step in here and say a word or two. Searching for the perfect thing or phrase to wrap us both within a word that sums the whole thing up. But this is just a little song, nothing much and isn't very long.
It definitely seems like, and you bringing up work made me think about this, that if an argument is based on fact and logic and evidence, for me personally, that's an argument that is very easy to navigate. It's when emotion comes into it that becomes difficult, isn't it? It's when you sort of feel hurt or misunderstood or not listened to. That's when it becomes a difficult argument to have.
Yeah, and it can also be reflective of other arguments that you've had in the past, which not necessarily with this person, but, you know, maybe with someone else, and brings back those feelings of feeling hurt and all of those kind of, you know, difficult feelings. And it's really common to just get very overwhelmed as well by your emotional response, which is why I think going back to this point around practicing your response, if all you can do is just stay calm, and then if the next thing you can do is try and see it from their point of view, you know, they're just these little stages that you can take yourself through. And the first time that I really applied this, you know, in my own relationship, in my own life, I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like I found a key. I mean, honestly, I really felt like it was quite, you know, quite magic in some ways. It sounds a bit dramatic, but I mean, my partner, he is always saying to me, oh my goodness, thank goodness you do the job that you do, otherwise I don't know where we'd be, you know. Talking to friends is a common theme of people whose, and you've mentioned this already, people who grew up with parents who argued openly in front of them. It's a common theme of those people now being really triggered by arguments and really struggling to cope with it and not wanting to engage with it because this deeper triggering, you know, so much more going on than that moment of that argument. Yeah, it's so true. And in fact, it's kind of like no surprise why I do the job that I do, because I was definitely exposed to quite harmful conflict as a child. And I've had to really, I don't know, sort of, I mean, obviously there's been a process for me to kind of improve how I respond in a kind of non-flight mode whenever sort of conflict's happening, but also that actually understanding that some conflict can be really helpful if you do it in a really helpful and supportive way, and not to kind of immediately have your kind of flight response, you know, because it's your shutters come down, alarm bells go off, and actually to remember that you're in a safe environment. This is not harmful. It's actually healthy to have these conversations, and you're okay. You know, stick to these rules, and you're okay. But yeah, so much is triggered by our past experiences, for sure. And I guess the first thing there is to recognise that is the reason why you're responding like that. Yeah, definitely. definitely.
Yeah.
And also recognising that on your partner. And that's again about kind of understanding understanding the makeup of the other person that you're interacting with. Because if they're also bringing those past vulnerabilities, you know, how are you going to adapt as a couple and cope together when, you know, you're both kind of responding in this way? So it's not only understanding what you bring and what your triggers might be, but it's also understanding what theirs might be as well.
Yeah. This line that resonated for me was in the book. In this book I've been reading recently, just casually reading, it's called How to Not Die Alone, The Surprising Science That Will Help You Find Love. Next to my bedside table by Logan Uri. If anybody is navigating modern dating with dating apps, it's absolutely brilliant book. Okay. Anyway, and at one point she mentions that, arguing is not the problem, it's how you come out of it that matters. And, you know, just once again saying it's normal, it's healthy, it's communication, but it's, I guess, what is a healthy way to come out of an argument?
I think a healthy way to come out of an argument, for me, it would be feeling that there's a common understanding, that, you know, that there's no kind of like win or lose element there, but that you've both understood where the other person's been coming from. And it's not necessarily an agreement. It's not that, oh, now you've brought me around to your thinking or that sort of thing, but actually being able to understand where that other person's coming from. And then from my point of view, I would say, if you feel that once you've got that understanding, that you can kind of compromise or alter what it is that you're doing in order to be able to kind of have resolution or come up, you know, with some kind of negotiated kind of outcome, then that's real collaboration, isn't it? And working on something together rather than kind of the outcome of that argument being, well, I still think I'm right and I still think I'm right. And, you know, that how can you really come together over that? And actually, and I also think as well, following on from that so much about relationships, any relationship is about how they enhance your life, right? And I'm not saying, you know, only be friends with someone who, you know, makes your life better. I mean, that's obviously not the case. But, you know, relationships are about enhancing our lives. Like, what do our friendships bring to us? What do we bring to our friendships? And how does that kind of like fulfill you and make your life, bring you kind of contentment, I suppose? And I think that is a really important way of looking at relationships and how we relate to others, that winning an argument isn't going to necessarily enhance your life or fulfill you ultimately.
Now, as always, we want to try these things out ourselves and we want you to try them out too. So we asked Verity to give us a challenge.
So basically, you sit down with a partner or maybe someone like a sibling or a friend, someone you've got a close relationship with, somewhere where there are absolutely no distractions, and you know that you've kind of agreed that you're going to have this time to talk to each other and listen to each other. And you take it in turns to talk. And the other person's role is absolutely nothing but listening. You can use a timer. So you could literally just put a 3-minute timer on your phone and just pop it there. And then after the person is finished talking, you then reflect back to them what you've heard. And then following that exercise, once you've both kind of done your listening and feeding back and reflecting back, then you can offer emotional or practical support.
Give it a try, won't you please give it a try, yes you should, give it a try, won't you?
Thank you so much to Verity. And if you want to find out more about the charity OnePlusOne and the work that they do, head over to www.oneplusone.org.uk And as I said at the top, there are links in our show notes for anyone who might need help and advice beyond what's on that website. And do you know what, as well? I didn't realise until I was just putting these notes together that national treasure Dame Judi Dench is the patron of the charity. The Patreon is the patron of the charity.
You're just subliminally trying to get people to join our Patreon there. Patreon. Is she now? Yes, I saw her on their website. Oh, that's why she's on there.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And in case you haven't been jotting down Verity's 5 points for how to move an argument from being harmful to healthy, then we will include that in our Patreon. So for free. So pop over there. Even if you're not a member of the Rump Club, you can still pop over there and get our episode extras for free.
And that's patreon.com/Write Up My Podcast.
That is an important detail.
That will be.
Well done.
Yeah, that will be over there. So the challenge, the listening challenge she set us, we thought this was a really good one because obviously it's one of those key points. And actually, even if you're not having an argument, it's so crucial to any kind of communication, isn't it, with another person?
Yes, because of course this, like a few episodes this season, actually, it's we can't actually, we kind of like waiting for an argument to happen before we can really try these tools out. So yes, the listening one is one we can do in our everyday, isn't it?
So you saying after the interview you didn't go home, kick off about something inconsequential with someone purely so that you could trigger an argument and put all of these points into action?
I'm really not taking my research seriously enough.
I mean, where's your dedication to the cause, friend?
Yeah, whereas
I, on the other hand, did.
You went home and you went, Chris,
you're an arsehole. Come on,
like,
hit me with it. I'm listening.
So what did you do? Did you try this out with Chris?
I did. And it was, I mean, I'm not going to go into the specifics of what the argument was about, mainly because I can't remember. But,
was it an argument?
No, it wasn't. It was more just, I know what it was about. It was about my eldest daughter who's 10 wants to get her ears pierced. And I was a bit like, sure. I mean, I don't see that that's a big problem. And I'd said to her, yeah, I mean, I guess so. Maybe we'll do it for your birthday, like no biggie, without realising that he felt very differently about it. And had very different feelings about it.
Yes, okay.
And my reflex in those situations is struggling to let the other person actually finish their point, struggling to let them get their point across, because I so emphatically want them to understand my perspective and where I'm coming from. I'll cut over them and I'll talk over them and because I'm not wanting to like big myself up, but I am quite eloquent. I'm quite good at expressing myself.
Obviously, there's not one listener who will disagree with that, Kate. Of the two, perhaps the most eloquent.
So if someone else is struggling to express how they're feeling, I struggle not to cut over them with a very well articulated point of how I'm feeling.
Yes, okay.
So this was a really good exercise because I had to shut the hell up and sit and let him talk around it as many times as he needed to until he understood maybe what he was trying to say as well, you know?
Yeah.
Because he had been blindsided by this topic. He hadn't had a chance to sit and formulate in his own mind what he wanted to say.
And did you tell him that you were doing this, or you just were uncharacteristically understanding?
Well, no, because actually it would have been weird in the moment for you to say, hold that thought. This is an exercise in arguing. I'm going to take notes as we go. So no, it just unravelled organically.
Very
but
good.
It was close enough to us having had our chat with Verity for my brain. One part of my brain was, in the moment. The other part of my brain was like, ting.
Yes. And
ding. This is happening. This is the moment.
Let's pause and listen. So how did that go?
It was really, really satisfying experience because it forced me to stop and listen to him, which wasn't something that I wanted to do but knew I had to do. And it stopped me from trying to hammer my point home. And actually, through listening to him and just shutting the hell up, I gave me time to process what they were saying rather than, if you leap in too quickly, you don't have a chance to really process what they've just said. And over the course of just letting him talk about it, it gave me time to process what he was saying. It gave me time to actually empathise with his perspective and where he was coming from. And then the act of kind of repeating the headlines back to him that really helped with the empathy side of things, really helped me be like, okay, no, I get where you're coming from. And you said this, and actually in the first 30 seconds, maybe I thought you were being motivated by A, but now through listening and repeating back to you, I realise actually your motivation is totally different. It's not what my knee-jerk opinion was.
That's interesting.
With. So, and I could tell that he felt heard, and he wasn't being defensive, and he wasn't being angry, because I could tell that he realised I did actually hear what he was saying. I felt like such a bloody grown-up at the end of it all. It was such a mature conversation.
Was he looking at you like slightly odd, like, wow, she's being such a grown-up?
Yeah, what does she want?
This is unusual.
What's going on?
And I know this isn't the point of it, but did that mean that he reciprocated and then was able to listen to you? Like, did that change how he might have behaved in the discussion?
It did, because it slowed the whole pace of the conversation down. So rather than being like, blah, blah, and the other person goes, blah, blah, and no one's thinking and everyone's just being defensive and knee-jerking, it slowed the whole tone of the interaction down. And I think because I gave him time to talk and think and talk around it and kind of work out what he was trying to say in a non-patronising sense, in the end, he kind of was like, it's not actually as big a deal as I thought it was. Yeah,
okay. So did you get your way in the end? Is she getting her ears pierced on her 10th birthday? Yeah. Kate is nodding.
Is this a terrible example? Ding, ding. And in the end, I won the argument.
But it's not about winning, it's the taking part that counts. It's the taking part that counts.
And actually, in the end, that was a conclusion, but it was a conclusion that we both came to. And I did feel in the moment of the conversation open to, okay, well, maybe I understand where Chris is coming from. Maybe we do wait. And that's fine as well.
Yeah.
So I would have been happy with either outcome, actually, in a way. And I felt differently at the end of it, how I did at the start of it. So at the start of it, I was just like, what's wrong? Like, why so uptight? Just chill out, man. And at the end, I was like, no, I get it. I get where you're coming from.
And do you think...
And I'm happy if you feel strongly enough about this, then we can wait. It's fine.
Yeah. And do you think that this is something you can carry on in your discussions? Like, is this a useful enough tool? Will you do it again, Kate?
I hope so. The problem is, when you are in that moment and you're feeling really angry, you're not always thinking clearly, are you? But I guess that's where Verity's tips of, like, take a breath and keep quiet, like button up for a bit until you've got control of what it is that you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So I really do genuinely think it is something that I will do again and again and again. And I think it's something that will have a massive impact on my relationships with people, because hopefully it'll just make me less of an arsehole, which is all we can hope for.
I mean, this podcast is good, but it's not a miracle worker, Kate.
And what about you, Gwen? Is this something that you feel... Have you had a chance to use it? Is it something you feel like you would be able to?
I've tried to provoke a couple of arguments with my cats, and they're just not biting. They just weren't going for it. I was like, you were really shit at catching that mouse. Your fur doesn't look very good today.
They're like, screw you, give me some food.
Yeah, all right, I'll give you some food. I haven't had a chance to put it into practice, but I really look forward to my next argument when I can do. But I was talking to a friend the other day who is getting married, and she was saying how she actually is getting married to a colleague, and they were having non-violent communication training at work, and they were paired up. And in that training, they had to do exactly what what Verity has set us to do, which is basically really listening to the other person, repeating back to them, showing that you're actually really hearing their story. And through that, they were able to really open up to each other. And then they fell in love.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's an amazing story. I really bloody love that story.
So actually through doing it, they got to know each other better.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now this is slightly different to what we're doing in this podcast, because it's not in a conflict situation. But what they've done actually throughout their relationship since, they've been together for a year now since, they make sure that they do it every week, where they have like an allotted time every week where they sit down and they share how they're feeling. And it doesn't have to necessarily be an issue they're having with the other person or anything, but it is just about, maybe they're experiencing the relationship, or maybe just what's going on for them at the time, and through this training, they actually sit, listen, hear, actively listen to each other. And she says she really feels it if, like, they go 10 days and they haven't done it.
Right.
She really feels the need to put it in. And as a result, they have really good communication. So I think, it's really great exercise even in non-conflict situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's key, isn't it? That actually this works in any scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the next time my ex-boyfriend comes round, God love him, and I he is like a match to the flame, and nobody else can provoke my instant rage as well as he does for absolutely very, very little, and so I look forward to practicing that in my own life.
Brace yourself, it's coming.
Thank you for listening to Write Up My Podcast, and sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this is the final episode in season 5, so we're going to be taking a little break.
It is, but we still love to hear from you, even when taking a little break. So please email us at writeupmypodcast@gmail.com with your thoughts, your musings, even if you've got anything that you think might be a great episode for our next series. Get in touch. And you can also get in touch with us on Instagram and Twitter at WriteUpMy.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow wherever you listen. And if you listen over on Apple, then we would love it if you could rate and review us, please. And please share with your friends.
And head on down to Patreon, where, as we said for this episode, we're going to put the notes from Verity's 5 steps for better arguing on there. But for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can join the Rump Club, where you will get access to all sorts of extra exclusive content.
You can catch up with what we're watching on telly and what we've been getting up to week in, week out.
Absolutely.
Exclusive content.
Head on to patreon.com/writeupmypodcast. And a great big heartfelt thank you, as always, to our fantastic team of talented people who help us put these episodes together.
That is Andy G, who creates all of our bonkers and brilliant music, and Erica Francis George, who does our artwork. Thank you, lovely people.
We'll be back in a couple of months with Series 6, but meanwhile, keep trying things
to make you feel good. Bye-bye.
Tell me, did you like the podcast, Brian?
No!
Oh. If, unlike Brian, you thought our podcast was really great, then don't hold back. Like, subscribe, and tell your mate. But if, like Brian, you thought our podcast wasn't fun, then just keep quiet. Don't feel the need to tell anyone. We'd love to hear from you if you've got some thoughts to share. Such rich and lovely views that all should be aware of. But I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate. 'Cause we don't need grumpy pants bringing everybody down. No, we don't need negative Nellies making people frown. No. So I hope you liked our podcast and you thought it was really great. And if you did, like, subscribe, and tell your mate.